Meet Olivia. She's the future of this family now. Nathan Caldwell said those words directly to his wife's face at his own family barbecue, surrounded by his board members, his relatives, and every person Emma had spent 12 years building relationships with on his behalf. He was not whispering. He was not ashamed. He said it like an announcement, like Emma was already gone. Like 12 years of sacrifice, like her family's fortune poured into saving his company, like every night she held his empire together while he slept, like none of it had ever happened. Emma did not cry. She did not scream. She reached into her handbag and placed something on that table that would change everything. If this story hits you somewhere deep, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and follow Emma's story all the way to the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. There is a kind of woman the world often overlooks. She does not demand applause. She does not announce her sacrifices. She does not wake up every morning expecting gratitude for what she has carried through the night. She simply keeps going, keeps giving, keeps holding the walls up while the people inside the house take the warmth for granted. Emma Whitmore was that kind of woman. And for 12 years, she had been the invisible foundation beneath everything Nathan Caldwell had built. They had met when they were young, when Nathan was still hungry, still uncertain, still the kind of man who called his mother 3 times a week because he needed someone to tell him he was doing the right thing. Emma had been 26 years old, working as a corporate financial consultant in Dallas, when a mutual friend introduced them at a dinner party in Highland Park. Nathan had been charming that night, genuinely charming, not the polished, calculated version of himself he would later become. He had laughed easily. He had listened. He had looked at Emma across a dinner table with something real in his eyes, something that made her believe for the first time in her adult life that she had found her person. She was wrong, but she would not understand that for a long time. In the beginning, their marriage had been good. Nathan built his real estate company Caldwell Corporation from a mid-size regional firm into one of the most respected development companies in Texas. Emma worked beside him, not as an employee, not officially, but as the quiet force behind every major decision. She reviewed contracts before he signed them. She sat across from investors when Nathan was too proud to admit he did not understand a term sheet. She built relationships with city planners, zoning officials, and financial institutions that Nathan's arrogance would have destroyed if left unchecked. She was not his wife in name only. She was his partner in every sense that actually mattered, and Nathan knew it. For the first several years, he acknowledged it. He would tell people at dinner parties that Emma was the smartest person in the room, and he meant it. He would reach for her hand when a negotiation got complicated. He would call her from his office at 11 o'clock at night, not because he needed business advice, but because hearing her voice made the pressure easier to carry. But success does something to certain men. It does not make them better. It makes them believe they were always the reason things worked. And slowly, inch by inch, Nathan Caldwell began to forget. He forgot who had reviewed the Harmon Properties deal before it closed and saved the company from a liability clause buried on page 47 of a 112-page contract. He forgot who had personally called Gerald Whitmore, Emma's father, a man with significant connections in Texas banking, to secure a line of credit that kept Caldwell Corporation alive during a market correction that nearly wiped them out in 2019. He forgot who had sat across from 3 different investors over the course of 8 months, explaining, persuading, and reassuring until the company had the capital it needed to survive. He forgot. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he chose to forget, because forgetting made it easier to believe that he had done this alone. Emma felt the shift before she could name it. It started as small things, the kind of things that seem petty when you try to explain them to someone else, but feel enormous when you are living inside them. Nathan stopped asking her opinion on deals. He stopped bringing home the contracts she used to review over dinner. He stopped introducing her as his partner and started introducing her simply as his wife. A word that delivered the way he began to deliver it sounded less like a title of honor and more like a category of furniture. She told herself it was stress. Successful men carried enormous pressure. She told herself it was temporary. Every marriage moved through seasons. She told herself that the man she had married was still in there somewhere behind the expensive suits and the golf club memberships and the new habit he had developed of checking his phone during conversations. She held on. Because Emma Whitmore had been raised by a woman who held on. Her mother, Catherine, had built a life from very little and passed on to her daughter the belief that commitment meant something, that marriage was not a contract you walked away from when the terms became inconvenient. But there is a difference between holding on and being held down, and Emma was about to learn that difference in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. The first time she heard Olivia Bennett's name, it came from an unexpected place. It was a Tuesday morning in February, and Emma had stopped by Nathan's downtown office to drop off some documents he had forgotten at home. His assistant, a young woman named Bridget, who had worked for Caldwell Corporation for 4 years and who genuinely liked Emma, looked up from her desk with an expression Emma did not immediately understand. "Mrs. Caldwell," Bridget said, standing up a little too quickly. "Mr. Caldwell is in a meeting." "That's fine," Emma said, setting the folder on the edge of the desk. "I just need to leave these for him. He forgot them this morning." Bridget nodded, but her eyes moved just briefly toward the closed door of Nathan's office, and something in that small, involuntary glance made Emma's stomach tighten. She did not push. She was not that kind of woman. She thanked Bridget, turned around, and walked back through the glass lobby doors. But in the elevator on the way down, she thought about that glance for a long time. That evening, Nathan came home later than usual. He said he'd had a dinner meeting with a development team from Houston. He showed her a menu on his phone, a steakhouse on Commerce Street, as if she had asked for proof, though she hadn't said a word. "I didn't ask you anything," Emma said quietly. "I know," Nathan said, already moving toward the kitchen. "I'm just telling you where I was. People who have nothing to hide don't explain things nobody asked about." He stopped, turned, looked at her with an expression she recognized, not guilt exactly, more like the face of a man calculating how much ground he had lost and whether it was worth defending. "Emma, I'm going to bed," she said. "Your dinner is in the refrigerator." She lay in the dark that night for a very long time. She did not cry. Emma had passed the stage of crying about Nathan a while ago, though she could not have told you exactly when. Crying required hope, the belief that things might change if the right person saw how much you were hurting. She had stopped believing that somewhere around the 3rd year of what she privately thought of as the cold period, the stretch of time during which Nathan had gradually become a stranger who shared her address. What she felt in the dark that night was not grief. It was clarity. It was the slow, patient hardening of a decision that had been forming for longer than she wanted to admit. She began very quietly to prepare. She called Michael Reynolds the following week. Michael was one of the most respected family law attorneys in Dallas, a methodical man in his early 60s with a reputation for being absolutely unimpressed by wealth or power, which was exactly what Emma needed. She had known Michael through her father's professional circle for years, and she trusted him in the way you trust someone who has never given you a reason not to. "I need you to tell me where I stand," she said, sitting across from him in his office on a cold February afternoon with a cup of coffee she barely touched. "Completely honestly, not what I want to hear. What is actually true." Michael looked at her for a moment. He had that quality, the quality of someone who understood that the most important thing he could offer a client in this particular moment was not advice, but witness. He was simply present, completely there. "Tell me everything," he said. She did. She told him about the 2019 financial crisis. She told him about the agreement she had signed, the one her own attorney, a woman named Susan Park, who had since retired, had insisted she execute before Emma transferred her family assets to stabilize Caldwell Corporation. She told him about the provisions in that agreement, the conditions, the triggers. Michael listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, reading through the documents she had placed in front of him. "Emma," he finally said, and his voice was careful, measured the voice of a man making sure every word carried exactly the weight he intended. "Do you understand what this agreement actually gives you?" "I think so," she said, "but I want you to explain it to me as if I don't." He nodded. "When you transferred your assets to save Caldwell Corporation in 2019, he said, your attorney at the time, and this was smart, this was genuinely smart, negotiated a conditional authority clause. In plain language, it means that if Nathan or anyone acting on behalf of the Caldwell family violated certain ethical and reputational conditions specified in this agreement, you would gain legal authority over a significant portion of the company's financial decisions." Emma sat still. "What counts as a violation?" she asked. "Public conduct that constitutes, and I'm quoting the document now, deliberate and demonstrable humiliation of the party of the second part in any professional or familial setting." The room was very quiet. "He brought a woman to the family barbecue," Emma said, "in front of his board members, in front of his family, in front of everyone." "Has that happened yet?" Michael asked. "No," Emma said. "Not yet." Michael looked at her. "But you believe it's coming?" "I know it's coming," she said. "I've known for 3 months. I've been waiting to understand what to do about it." Michael set the documents down carefully. "Then you need to be ready," he said, "because when it happens you will have a window, and windows like this don't stay open forever." She nodded. "I'll be ready," she said. She was not wrong about Olivia Bennett. Over the following weeks, Emma learned things not by snooping, not by hiring investigators, but simply by paying the kind of attention that people who are preparing for something pay to the world around them. She noticed that Nathan began leaving for the office earlier and returning later. She noticed that his phone, which had always been a casual presence on the kitchen counter or the coffee table, was now attached to his person at all times in his pocket at dinner, face down on the nightstand when he slept. She noticed that he had started speaking about the company differently. There was a new energy in his voice, not the anxious energy of someone carrying a heavy burden, but the inflated, almost giddy energy of someone who believed they were about to do something bold. "We're restructuring the executive team," he told her one evening over dinner, in the tone of someone delivering news that didn't require a response. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Bringing in some fresh perspectives," he said. "New blood. The company needs people who understand where the market is going." "And where is the market going?" she asked. He looked at her, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, something moved behind his eyes, something that looked almost like guilt before it disappeared. "Upward," he said. "Always upward." She said nothing. But that night, after he was asleep, she sat at the small desk in her home office and sent Michael Reynolds an email with a single line, "I think we're getting closer. Make sure everything is ready." He replied within 20 minutes, even though it was past midnight. "It is. So are you." The Caldwell annual family barbecue had been a tradition since before Nathan was born. His father, Robert Caldwell, had started it in the 1980s as a way of bringing together the extended family, the business partners, and the longtime friends who formed the outer ring of the Caldwell social world. When Robert died, Patricia Caldwell, Nathan's mother, a woman who wore elegance like armor and wielded social influence like a scalpel, had continued the tradition with an iron hand. The event was held every July at the family's private ranch outside of Austin. There were caterers, a live band, long tables set under the oak trees, and the kind of casual wealth on display that people of a certain generation referred to simply as a nice gathering, while secretly understanding that everyone was being assessed. Emma had attended every year of her marriage without fail. She had become over time a genuine fixture of the event, the woman who organized the seating arrangements, who remembered everyone's children's names, who charmed Robert's old business partners, and made Patricia's society friends feel welcome. She had, in the quiet and gracious way she did most things, made herself indispensable. This year she arrived early. She wore a pale ivory linen dress, simple, clean, beautiful, without being aggressive about it. Her hair was done the way she always wore it at these events, smooth and composed. She greeted Patricia with a kiss on the cheek and a warm inquiry about her arthritis. She complimented the caterers on the floral arrangements. She found her usual seat at the main family table, the long oak table under the biggest tree where the Caldwell inner circle always gathered, and she placed her handbag carefully on the chair beside her. Inside that handbag was a white envelope. She had sealed it herself the night before at Michael's office, after reviewing every page one final time. She sat down. She accepted a glass of iced tea from a passing server. She smiled at Nathan's cousin David, who had arrived with his wife and their twin daughters, and who always made Emma laugh with his stories about the family's early years. And then she saw the car coming up the long private drive. Nathan's black SUV. Her chest did not clench. Her hands did not tremble. Something in her body, something she had spent the last several months building quietly, stone by careful stone, simply settled into place. She watched the car stop. She watched the door open. She watched Nathan step out. And then she watched Olivia Bennett step out beside him. The woman was younger, early 30s, Emma guessed. She was dressed well carefully in a way that said someone had advised her on exactly how to look for this specific occasion. She stood close to Nathan as they walked, not touching him, but near enough to make the relationship unmistakable to anyone paying attention, which everyone was. The gathering stilled in that particular way that gatherings still when something wrong is happening and no one is sure yet whether to acknowledge it. Patricia Caldwell's expression did not change, but Emma saw her hand tighten around her glass. Nathan's cousin David stopped mid-sentence. The band, oblivious, continued playing something cheerful in the background. Nathan walked straight to the main family table. He walked with the slightly too deliberate stride of a man who had rehearsed this in his head and was now executing the plan regardless of what his body wanted to do about it. He stopped in front of Emma. He looked at her. And he said, "Emma, I'd like you to meet Olivia Bennett. She's going to be an important part of my future." The words landed like something dropped from a very great height. For 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. Patricia set her glass down with a small, precise click. David's wife made a sound that was not quite a word. Someone at the outer tables who had not heard but could feel the shift in the atmosphere laughed at something, and the laugh sounded grotesque and wrong in the silence. Emma looked at Olivia Bennett. Olivia looked back at her. And to her credit, or perhaps to the credit of whatever she had told herself about this situation, she did not look away. She held Emma's gaze with an expression that was neither apologetic nor triumphant. She simply looked back, as if she had already decided how she fit into this story, and she was comfortable with the answer she had given herself. Emma looked back at Nathan. He was waiting. How she realized, genuinely waiting to see what she would do. He had calculated the odds and decided that she would either cry, or she would make a scene, or she would fall apart in front of his family and his board members and give him the narrative he needed, the emotionally unstable wife, the difficult woman, the reason he had to move on. Emma reached into her handbag. She removed the white envelope. She set it on the table between them with the calm, deliberate precision of someone who has been waiting a long time to put something in exactly the right place. She looked at her husband. "Before you introduce anyone else into this family," she said, "you need to sign the papers that remove me from it." The silence that followed was of a different quality than the first silence. The first silence had been shock. This one was understanding. Nathan stared at the envelope. He stared at it with an expression Emma had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not dismissiveness, not calculation. Something underneath all of those things. Something that looked for just a moment like fear. He reached out and picked it up. He turned it over. He looked back at Emma. "What is this?" he said, though she thought he already knew. "Divorce papers," she said simply. "Prepared by Michael Reynolds. Everything is in order." Olivia Bennett had taken one very small step backward. Patricia Caldwell was absolutely still. "Emma," Nathan said, and his voice had dropped, become quieter, become the voice he used in rooms when he was trying to bring a situation back under his control. "Emma, let's not do this here." "You chose here," she said. "I just chose how." She stood up. She picked up her glass of iced tea. She took a small, calm sip. She set it back down. "When you're ready to discuss the terms," she said, "Michael's number is on the top page. He's available Monday through Friday. He does not take weekend calls, so I'd suggest you call first thing Monday morning." She looked at Olivia Bennett one more time, not with hatred, not with contempt, but with the kind of look that says, "I see exactly what this is, and I am not afraid of it." Then she picked up her handbag and walked away from the Caldwell family table. The band was still playing. Someone somewhere across the ranch laughed again at something funny, and Emma Whitmore walked across the dry Texas grass in her ivory dress and her good shoes, and she did not look back once, not because she wasn't feeling anything, but because she had already decided that the next chapter of her life would be written in forward motion only. Behind her, she heard Nathan call her name. Once, twice. She did not stop. She reached her car. She sat down in the driver's seat. She placed her handbag on the passenger seat with great care. She put both hands on the steering wheel, and then alone in her car with no audience and no performance required of her, Emma Whitmore allowed herself to take one long shaking breath. Just one, because she was not done yet, not even close. What Nathan Caldwell did not know, what he could not have imagined standing at that family table with his girlfriend on his arm and his divorce papers in his hand, was that the envelope Emma had placed in front of him was only the beginning. The real documents, the ones that mattered, the ones that Michael Reynolds had spent 3 months preparing with the careful, methodical precision of someone building an airtight case from the inside out, were already filed. Not with Nathan's attorney, with the Caldwell Corporation Board of Directors, and with the Financial Oversight Committee that Nathan had never paid much attention to because he had always assumed it would never pay much attention to him. He was about to find out how wrong he was. Emma started the car. She pulled out of the ranch and onto the long private road that led back toward the highway, and as the Austin skyline appeared in the distance against the evening sky, something changed in her chest. She recognized it after a moment. It was the feeling of someone putting down a weight they had been carrying so long they had forgotten it was not supposed to be permanent. She turned on the radio. She drove. And 12 years of holding everything together began quietly, irrevocably, to let go. Nathan stood at that table for a long moment after Emma walked away, holding the white envelope in both hands, like he wasn't sure whether to open it or set it on fire. Olivia had taken another small step backward. She was no longer standing quite so close to him. Patricia Caldwell had not moved. She sat perfectly upright in her chair with her glass in front of her, and her face arranged into the careful, composed expression she had worn through every difficult moment of her public life. But her eyes were following Emma's retreating figure across the grass, and those eyes were not composed at all. David, Nathan's cousin, finally broke the silence. "Nathan," he said, and his voice was very quiet, the kind of quiet that is actually louder than shouting. "What did you just do?" Nathan did not answer. He was still looking at the envelope. The band finished their song and started another one. The servers continued moving between tables. At the outer edges of the gathering, people who had not seen what happened were still laughing, still eating, still existing in the version of this afternoon that had not yet been destroyed. Nathan finally looked up. He scanned the faces around him, his mother, his cousin, the board members at the adjacent table, who were very deliberately looking at their plates, and something shifted in his expression. The confidence he had walked in with the performance of a man who had made his decision and was comfortable with it had developed a hairline crack. He pulled out his chair and sat down. He put the envelope in his jacket pocket without opening it. "Everything is fine," he said. Nobody responded. Olivia sat down beside him slowly, carefully, like someone sitting in a chair they were not sure would hold their weight. Patricia picked up her glass, took a small controlled sip, and said in the tone of a woman who had been managing crises since before Nathan was born, "We will discuss this tomorrow. Not here, not tonight." "There's nothing to discuss," Nathan said. "Nathan." Her voice dropped one register, just one. But everyone at that table heard exactly what that register meant. He stopped talking. And that was the end of the Caldwell family barbecue, even though it continued for another 3 hours. Emma drove back to Dallas with the radio on and her hands steady on the wheel. She did not call anyone. She did not stop anywhere. She went home to the house she had shared with Nathan for 9 years, walked through the front door, and went directly to the room she had been using as a home office for the past several months, the room where gradually and carefully she had moved the things that mattered most to her. She sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop. She sent Michael Reynolds one message. "It happened, exactly as we expected. I'm ready to move." He called her back in 4 minutes. "Are you all right?" he asked first. He always asked that first. It was one of the things she trusted about him. "I'm fine," she said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. "I'm genuinely fine, Michael. I need you to file everything Monday morning, first thing." "It's already prepared," he said. "I just need your confirmation." "You have it," she said. "All of it." There was a brief pause on his end, not uncertainty, just the pause of a man who understood the weight of what was about to happen. "Emma," he said, "once we file, it moves fast. The board notification, the financial review, the conditional authority clause, all of it activates within 72 hours. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been prepared for 3 months," she said. "All right," he said. "Then we move Monday." She closed the laptop. She sat in the quiet house for a while, and she let herself feel the full size of what was coming. Not with fear, with something closer to the feeling you get standing at the edge of something very high just before you decide to jump, not because you don't know the fall will be hard, but because you know staying on the edge is harder. She had saved Nathan Caldwell's company in 2019, and she had never told anyone the full story of how she did it. Not even Nathan knew everything. He knew she had transferred assets. He knew she had made calls. He knew that the crisis had passed and the company had survived, and he had come home one evening and embraced her in the kitchen and said, "We made it," as though it had been a shared effort, as though he had been beside her for every one of the 47 days she had spent keeping his empire from collapsing while he was in Phoenix, closing a development deal that turned out to be worth a fraction of what he told the board it would be worth. What Nathan did not know was the specific language of the agreement Susan Park had drafted before Emma signed over her family's assets. What Nathan did not know was that Susan Park had been very, very good at her job. And what Nathan absolutely did not know was that Olivia Bennett had made a mistake, a significant one 3 weeks before the barbecue in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Caldwell Corporation building during a meeting that Emma was not supposed to know had happened. But Emma knew. She had known for 18 days. She leaned back in her chair and thought about that meeting. She thought about the person who had told her, and she thought about what Monday morning was going to look like for Nathan Caldwell. Then she went to bed and slept better than she had in 2 years. Nathan did not sleep at all. He sat in the parking lot of a hotel near the ranch for almost an hour after the barbecue ended, with Olivia in the passenger seat and the envelope on the center console between them still unopened. "You should open it," Olivia said finally. "I know what's in it," he said. "Nathan." She turned toward him. "This is not what we planned." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." What they had planned, what Nathan had discussed with his mother over several months of careful private conversation, was a controlled separation, a quiet uncoupling that he would manage on his own terms in his own time with Emma, eased out of her informal role in the company, gradually enough that no one would notice the transition until it was complete. He would have been generous. He had told himself that repeatedly. He would have been fair. He would have given her a settlement that was more than reasonable, and she would have moved on, and the company would have continued, and Olivia would have stepped naturally into the space Emma had occupied without anyone having to make any dramatic announcements. That had been the plan. Emma's plan had been different. "My mother is going to say this is your fault," Nathan said. He was not looking at Olivia. He was looking through the windshield at the dark road. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Your mother already blames me for everything," she said. "That's not new." "She's going to go after you now," he said. "You understand that. She's going to make you the story." "Then you need to make sure I'm not the story," Olivia said. Her voice was calm and precise in a way that if Nathan had been paying closer attention, might have made him wonder who exactly this woman was and what she was actually thinking. "Open the envelope, Nathan. We need to know what we're dealing with." He picked it up. He tore it open. He pulled out the papers and turned on the overhead light. He read for a while. Olivia watched his face. He reached the 3rd page. He stopped. "What is it?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. He read the same paragraph twice, then a 3rd time. "There's a clause here," he said slowly, "a financial authority clause from the 2019 restructuring. What does it say?" "It says—" He stopped, started again. "It says that if certain conditions were violated, Emma has legal authority over a portion of the company's financial decisions." Olivia was very still. "What conditions?" "Public humiliation," he said, and his voice had changed. The steadiness in it was gone. "Deliberate and demonstrable humiliation in any professional or familial setting." The silence in the car was very different from the silence at the barbecue. This silence had teeth. "Nathan," Olivia said carefully, "who drafted that agreement?" "Susan Park," he said. "Emma's attorney. She retired in 2020. I never—" He stopped. "I read this agreement. I signed this agreement. I don't know how I missed this." "Because you didn't expect it to matter," Olivia said. And something in the way she said it, something very precise and very quiet, made Nathan turn and look at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "Know what? That I didn't expect it to matter. I didn't tell you that. I never used those words." Olivia looked back at him. "It was an assumption," she said. "Obviously." Nathan looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked back at the papers. But something had changed in the car. Something small and cold had entered it, and neither of them acknowledged it, and it sat between them for the rest of the night. Monday morning arrived the way significant mornings always arrive, looking exactly like any other morning until you are inside it. Nathan was in his office at 7:15 earlier than usual with his personal attorney Gerald Foss on the phone and the divorce papers spread across his desk. Gerald was a compact man with a rapid, confident way of speaking that Nathan had always found reassuring. He did not find it reassuring this morning. "The clause is valid," Gerald said. "I've reviewed it twice. Susan Park was thorough, I'll give her that. The language is airtight." "Can we challenge it?" Nathan asked. "On what grounds you signed it? Emma signed it. It was executed properly. The conditions are clearly defined, and what happened Saturday at the ranch. Nathan, there were 40 people there. If Emma's attorney calls any 3 of them as witnesses to characterize Saturday as a public humiliation, a judge will agree with him before lunch." Nathan pressed 2 fingers against his forehead. "What does the clause actually give her?" he asked. "Oversight authority over specific financial decisions, primarily those related to debt management and investor relations, which, given where the company is right now with the Henderson Development Project and the outstanding loan from Meridian Capital." "Gerald." "It gives her significant leverage," Gerald said plainly. "More than you want her to have. More than I would have advised you to give anyone." "I didn't give it to her," Nathan said. "She took it." "She negotiated it," Gerald corrected him, and his tone made clear that he considered the distinction important. 3 years ago, when your company was about to go under, she negotiated it as a condition of her own financial sacrifice. Nathan, I need you to hear me clearly. The woman who drafted this clause knew exactly what she was doing. Nathan said nothing. "You need to call her," Gerald said, "before Michael Reynolds files anything with the board. You need to call her today and begin a conversation, because if you let this go to the board without—" "I'll handle it," Nathan said. "Nathan." "I said I'll handle it." He ended the call. He sat at his desk for a moment alone with his thoughts and his papers, and the particular silence of a room where someone has just been told something they did not want to hear. Then he called Emma. She picked up on the second ring. "I read the clause," he said. No greeting, no pretense. "I know," she said. "We need to talk." "We are talking," she said. "In person, Emma. This is—" He stopped, recalibrated. "This is complicated, and I think we both know it needs to be handled in person." "I'm available Thursday," she said. "Michael's office, 10 o'clock. "I was thinking somewhere more private," he said. "Somewhere we could actually—" "Michael's office," she repeated. "Thursday, 10 o'clock. Bring Gerald if you want. I'd actually prefer it." She hung up. Nathan set his phone down. He stared at the wall. I had spent 12 years watching Emma manage difficult situations, investors who were angry contractors, who were unreliable family members, who were being unreasonable, and he had always admired in an abstract way the composure she brought to those moments, the way she never raised her voice, the way she never let anyone see her rattled. He had always thought of it as a quality she had. It had not occurred to him until this moment that it was a quality she had developed specifically for dealing with people who were not being fair to her. It had not occurred to him until this moment that he had been one of those people for a very long time. He pushed the thought away. He picked up his phone and called his mother. Patricia answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting," she said. "I know. I talked to Gerald this morning. And the clause is valid. Emma has leverage." There was a pause on Patricia's end. Not a surprised pause, a thinking pause. "How much leverage?" she asked. "Enough," he said. "Enough to make this complicated if she decides to use it." "She will use it," Patricia said with the certainty of a woman who had spent her entire life in rooms where leverage was the primary currency. "Emma is not emotional, Nathan. She has never been emotional. That is something I always respected about her, even when it was inconvenient for me. She will use every advantage she has." "I know," Nathan said. "Then you need to move before she does," Patricia said. "You need to control the narrative. If the board hears about this from Michael Reynolds instead of from you, you lose the room before you even walk into it." "I'm calling a board meeting," Nathan said. "Wednesday." "Good. I want you there." "Of course," Patricia said. But then she paused again. "Nathan, what about Olivia?" The question landed with a particular weight. "What about her?" he said. "The board is going to ask questions," Patricia said carefully, "about how long she has been involved with the company, about what role she has played in your decision-making. If there is anything there that could complicate—" "There isn't," Nathan said. Another pause. "Are you certain?" Patricia asked. And Nathan, who had been certain of very few things since Saturday evening, said yes. He said it quickly. He said it without thinking. And that, as it turned out, was the second largest mistake he made that week. The first had been walking into that barbecue with Olivia Bennet on his arm in front of 40 witnesses. The third he hadn't made yet, but it was coming. It was coming on Wednesday morning in the Caldwell Corporation boardroom when a woman named Sandra Cho, the company's chief financial officer, a precise and deeply competent person who had worked for Caldwell Corporation for 11 years and who had liked Emma Whitmore from the first time they met, received an email at 6:47 in the morning that made her put down her coffee and read the same document 3 times before she picked up her phone. The email was from Michael Reynolds' office. It contained a notification of the Conditional Authority Clause activation copies of the original 2019 agreement and a formal request for financial records related to 2 specific company decisions made in the preceding 18 months. Sandra read it a 3rd time. Then she forwarded it to the 3 other board members she trusted most and wrote 4 words beneath it: "We need to talk, now." By the time Nathan walked into the boardroom Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., confident, prepared, dressed in his best charcoal suit, ready to control the narrative the way his mother had advised him, 4 of his 7 board members had already read Michael Reynolds' notification. He did not know this. He stood at the head of the table and looked around the room and thought he saw the usual faces, the usual arrangement of loyalty and deference that had characterized every board meeting for the past several years. He was wrong. What he was actually looking at was a room full of people who had spent the past 36 hours quietly asking themselves a question they had never thought to ask before. What exactly did Emma Whitmore do in 2019, and why did nobody ever fully explain it? Sandra Cho looked at Nathan from her seat midway down the table. She had a folder in front of her. She had not opened it yet. She was waiting. Nathan began to speak. "I've called this meeting," he said, "to address some personal matters that have created a certain amount of external noise over the past few days. I want to be direct with the board because you deserve directness, and I want to assure everyone in this room that the company's operations are not affected and will not be affected by Nathan." Sandra's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Before you continue, I need to ask you something." Nathan stopped. He looked at her. "Go ahead," he said with the careful patience of a man who does not feel patient. "This clause," she said, opening her folder and placing a document on the table, "in the 2019 restructuring agreement. Can you explain to the board when you became aware of its specific language?" The room was very still. Nathan looked at the document. "I reviewed the full agreement at the time of signing," he said. "And were you aware," Sandra said, "that this clause would activate in the specific circumstances that occurred last Saturday?" "A beat. I was aware of the general terms," Nathan said. "Nathan." Sandra's voice was very careful now, very precise. "I'm going to ask you something and I need a direct answer because the rest of this conversation depends on it. Did you bring Olivia Bennet to the family barbecue last Saturday, knowing this clause existed in your wife's agreement?" The silence stretched. Several people around the table shifted very slightly in their chairs. Nathan looked at Sandra, and for a man who was very good at controlling rooms, he took 1 second too long to answer. 1 second. That was all it took. Sandra Cho nodded slowly, not as an answer to his silence, but as a confirmation of something she had already suspected. She closed her folder. She looked around the room. "I think," she said quietly, "we all need to hear from Emma." Across town, Emma Whitmore was sitting in Michael Reynolds' office with a cup of coffee and a legal pad going through documents, with the focused calm of someone who had already done the hardest part and was now simply executing. Michael's assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "you just got a call from Sandra Cho at Caldwell Corporation. She wants to know if you're available to speak with the board." Emma looked at Michael. Michael looked back at her. "Wednesday?" he asked. "Wednesday," Emma said. She picked up her pen. She wrote Sandra Cho's name at the top of the legal pad, and then she wrote underneath it 3 words that nobody at Caldwell Corporation had ever seen together in the same sentence before: "Tell them everything." Because that was exactly what she intended to do. What Nathan had spent 12 years believing was that the quiet woman beside him was quiet because she had nothing to say. I was about to find out she had been waiting for the right room to say it in, and she had just been handed the most important room of all. The board of directors of Caldwell Corporation, the company she had saved, sat waiting for her. And Emma Whitmore, for the first time in 12 years, was walking toward power that belonged entirely to herself. She walked into the Caldwell Corporation boardroom at 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, wearing a dark navy blazer and carrying a single leather folder that Michael Reynolds had handed her in the lobby downstairs with both hands like something that deserved to be held carefully. She did not look at Nathan when she entered, not because she was avoiding him, but because she was not there for him. She was there for the room. Sandra Cho stood up when Emma came in. That small gesture, standing in a room where Nathan was already seated, said more than any introduction could have. Two other board members followed Sandra's lead. A man named Robert Haynes, who had been on the board for 8 years and who had shaken Emma's hand at every company Christmas party and always asked about her father's health, stood up as well. 4 people standing, 3 remaining seated. Nathan sat at the head of the table. He watched Emma cross the room. His jaw was set in that particular way it got when he was working very hard to appear composed. Gerald Foss sat beside him with a yellow legal pad and a pen he was not yet using. Emma took the chair Sandra had indicated midway down the table, facing the window, facing Nathan without being directly across from him. Michael sat to her left. She placed her folder on the table and folded her hands on top of it. "Thank you for making time," she said, addressing the room, not any individual. Her voice was clear and unhurried. "I know this isn't a standard situation, and I'll try to make this as direct as possible." "We appreciate that," Sandra said, sitting back down. "I think everyone here would prefer directness." Gerald Foss cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I want to note for the record that Emma Whitmore is here in her capacity as a private party, not as a representative of Caldwell Corporation, and any claims she makes this morning should be understood in that context." "Understood," Emma said pleasantly. "And anything I present this morning is documented. Every page, every date, every signature, so the context can be whatever Gerald needs it to be." Gerald wrote something on his legal pad. Nathan looked at the folder in front of Emma. Robert Haynes leaned forward. "Emma, I think what the board wants to understand, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I suspect I'm not alone, is what exactly happened in 2019. Because I've been on this board since 2017, and I sat in rooms during that financial crisis, and I was told a version of events that I'm now questioning." The room became very attentive. "What version were you told?" Emma asked. "That Nathan secured emergency financing through a combination of personal assets and a private investor arrangement," Robert said. "That the company restructured its debt internally and emerged from the crisis through strong leadership and quick decision-making." Emma nodded slowly. "And how much of that is true?" Sandra asked, looking at Emma directly. "The company did restructure its debt," Emma said, "and it did emerge from the crisis. Those parts are accurate." She paused. "The rest of it," she said, "is a story someone told because the true version was more complicated and required acknowledging someone they preferred not to acknowledge." She opened the folder. She placed the first document on the table and slid it toward Robert Haynes. "In March of 2019, she said, Caldwell Corporation was 43 days from a default on its primary loan with Meridian Capital. The default would have triggered a cascade of secondary obligations that the company could not have met. The result would have been bankruptcy, not restructuring. Bankruptcy." Nobody spoke. "At that point," Emma continued, "Nathan had exhausted his direct options. The Phoenix development project he had told the board was worth $80 million was actually leveraged at a ratio that left the company exposed by nearly $30 million beyond what had been disclosed. I became aware of this, not because Nathan told me, but because I went through the company's financial records myself when he came home one night in February, and I found him sitting in the kitchen at 2 in the morning with a glass of scotch and every document from his office briefcase spread across the table." She let that image settle. "He didn't tell me that night how bad it was," she said. "He told me it was a temporary cash flow issue. He told me he had it under control. He went to bed at 3 in the morning and I sat at that kitchen table until 6 a.m. reading every document he had brought home." Sandra looked at Nathan. Nathan was looking at the table. "I called my father the next morning," Emma said. "Gerald Whitmore. Some of you knew him. He passed away in 2021. He was a man who had spent 40 years in Texas banking, and he understood immediately what I was describing. He told me what it would take to prevent a default. He told me the number, and he told me that if I was going to do this, I needed to protect myself first." She slid a second document across the table. "That's when I called Susan Park," she said. "She drafted the agreement you've all received copies of this week. The conditional authority clause was her idea, not mine. She told me, and I remember this exactly, she said, Emma, if you are going to save someone else's company with your own family's assets, you need to make sure there is a legal mechanism that ensures those assets are not simply absorbed and forgotten. You need to make sure there is a consequence for being treated as disposable. The room was absolutely still. Robert Haynes was reading the document in his hands. "How much?" he said quietly without looking up. "How much did you transfer?" $4.2 million, Emma said, "from a trust my father had built over 30 years, plus a personal loan guarantee of an additional $2 million that I secured against my own property." Gerald Foss had stopped writing. Nathan had not moved. $6.2 million, Sandra said. Not a question, a confirmation. Said quietly the way people say numbers that are too large to absorb quickly. "That's correct," Emma said. "And how much of that has been repaid?" Robert asked. Emma looked at him. "None of it," she said. The sound that moved through the room at that word was not dramatic. It was actually very quiet, the sound of multiple people exhaling at slightly different times, the sound of chairs shifting, the sound of a pen being set down on a table. Small sounds that together added up to something enormous. Gerald started to speak. The nature of the 2019 arrangement was... "Gerald." Sandra's voice was not unkind, but it was final. "Please." Gerald stopped. Sandra looked at Emma. "What do you need from this board?" Before Emma could answer, Nathan spoke. He had been silent so long that the sound of his voice startled several people. "She's leaving out context," he said. His voice was controlled, but the control was visible the way the effort of holding something in is visible in a person's face and neck and hands. The 2019 situation was more complex than she's making it sound. The Phoenix Project had challenges that were market-driven, not the result of Nathan. Emma turned and looked at him directly for the first time since she had walked into the room. "I am not here to argue about Phoenix." "Then what are you here for?" he said, and the control slipped slightly, just slightly enough for the room to hear it. "I'm here," she said, "because Sandra Cho asked me to be, and because there are people in this room who deserve to make decisions based on accurate information." She turned back to the board. "I'm not asking this board for money," she said. "I want to be very clear about that. The financial settlement between Nathan and me is a separate matter, and it will be handled separately. What I am asking this board to do is look at a second set of documents." She opened the folder again. This time, what she placed on the table was different. It was not a financial record. It was a meeting log, with a date stamp, from 4 months ago. Sandra picked it up. She read the top line. Her expression changed in a way that was subtle, but unmistakable. The way a face changes when it encounters something it was not prepared for. "This is a Caldwell Corporation internal meeting log," Sandra said, "from March 14th. "Yes," Emma said. "I wasn't at this meeting," Sandra said. "No," Emma said. "You weren't." "Who was Nathan?" "Patricia Caldwell, the company's legal counsel, James Whitfield, and one other person." She paused. "Olivia Bennett," she said. The temperature in the room changed. Robert Haynes looked up sharply. "Olivia Bennett was at a closed executive meeting in March," he said. "In what capacity?" That, Emma said, is exactly the right question. What the meeting log showed was not immediately scandalous on its face. It was a record of a strategy discussion language about organizational restructuring, about transition planning, about the company's long-term leadership direction. Standard corporate language. The kind of language that appears in hundreds of documents every year without anyone looking twice. But the meeting log had been requested by Emma's attorney under the Conditional Authority Clause, which gave her access to certain company records. And Michael Reynolds, reading through those records over a long weekend in July, had noticed something. Olivia Bennett had been listed not as a guest, not as a consultant, not as a personal invitee of Nathan's. She had been listed in the meeting log under a specific category of attendee that only applied to people with a defined strategic role in the company. She had been listed as an advisor, which meant she had been operating in an official capacity within Caldwell Corporation for at least 4 months before Nathan stood at that barbecue and introduced her as his future. Which meant the board had never been told. Which meant Patricia Caldwell and Nathan had been integrating Olivia into the company's decision-making structure while simultaneously managing Emma out of her informal role, all without disclosing any of it to the board. Sandra set the meeting log down. She looked at Nathan. "Is this accurate?" she said. Nathan looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at his legal pad. "Nathan," Sandra said. Her voice had developed an edge. Not angry, harder than that. the edge of someone who has been in business for a long time and recognizes the specific shape of having been misled. Is Olivia Bennett an advisor to this company? She has been involved in some preliminary discussions, Nathan began. Yes or no, Sandra said. A long moment. In an informal capacity, Nathan said. Nothing was formalized. Nothing was... Was she compensated? Robert Haynes asked. Silence. Nathan, Robert said. Was she compensated by Caldwell Corporation in any form? Nathan looked at Gerald again. Gerald said very carefully, I would advise my client not to answer that question without... She was, Emma said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She placed one more document on the table. This is a financial record from the company's discretionary advisory budget, she said. $40,000, disbursed in 2 payments, February and April of this year. The recipient is listed as OB Consulting Services. She slid it down the table. OB, she said. Olivia Bennett. The room did not erupt. It did not need to. The silence that followed was more devastating than any eruption could have been. It was the silence of people processing the full shape of what they were looking at. Not just an affair, not just a marriage falling apart, but a deliberate, structured attempt to reshape a company's leadership while deceiving the people responsible for overseeing it. Robert Haynes set the document down. He looked at Nathan Caldwell with the expression of a man who has known someone for a long time and is recalculating everything he thought he knew about them. I need a recess, he said. Sandra nodded. 15 minutes. People began to move. Chairs scraped back. Voices started low and careful in pairs and small clusters. Nathan stood up. He moved toward Emma, and Michael Reynolds stood up at the same moment, not blocking Nathan exactly, but present in the space between them in a way that was clearly intentional. Emma, Nathan said. His voice was lower now, private. The voice he used in the kitchen, in the car, in the rooms where they had once been 2 people instead of opposing parties. I need to talk to you. We can schedule something through Michael, she said. Not about the company, about us. He stopped. About what I did. She looked at him. For a moment, just a moment, the boardroom fell away, and it was just Nathan and Emma and 12 years of everything between them. Nathan, she said, and her voice was not hard. It was something more difficult than hard. It was finished. There is no conversation about us that changes what happened in that boardroom this morning. There is no conversation about us that changes what you did on Saturday. You made your choices, deliberately, in front of everyone I've ever stood beside for you. I know, he said. And the word came out of him differently than she expected. Not as a defense, not as a prelude to an explanation, just as itself, bare and small and too late. I know. Then let Michael handle the rest, she said. She turned back to her chair. She sat down. She placed her hands flat on the table and looked at the documents in front of her and waited for Robert Haynes to call the room back to order. Across town in the Caldwell family home, where Patricia had received the news of the board meeting by phone 20 minutes earlier, the older woman sat in her living room with her phone in her lap and her hands very still and thought about Emma Whitmore with something she had not expected to feel. She thought about her with respect. Patricia Caldwell was not a soft woman. She had not been raised soft, and she had not allowed herself to become soft in the 71 years she had been navigating a world that rewarded hardness. She had built the Caldwell family's social standing with the same deliberate structural precision that her late husband had built their financial standing, and she had done it by being smarter than the people around her and more patient than the people against her. She had underestimated Emma. She sat with that fact for a long time. She had seen Emma as a useful appendage, a woman who was good at the supporting functions of a powerful man's life and who would, when the time came, be replaced with the minimum necessary disruption. She had not seen Emma as a strategist. She had not seen her as someone who had spent 3 years quietly preparing for exactly this moment, who had saved documents and preserved records and worked with an attorney to construct a legal framework that would activate at precisely the right time. She had not seen her. That was her mistake. Patricia picked up her phone. She called James Whitfield, the company's legal counsel. James, she said when he answered, what is happening in that boardroom right now? Mrs. Caldwell, James said carefully, I'm not sure this is the right time for me to... James. Her voice had the quality it got when she was done negotiating. Tell me what is happening. A pause. Emma presented financial records, James said. The 2019 restructuring, the full picture, and then she presented the March meeting log, with Olivia listed as an advisor. Patricia closed her eyes. "Is the board asking about compensation?" she said. "They found the OB consulting payments," James said. Patricia sat very still for a moment. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Patricia," James said, and his voice was the voice of a man choosing his words with extreme care. "If the board votes today to open a formal investigation, the scope of that investigation will include the March meeting, the advisory payments, and any decisions made during the period when Olivia Bennett was operating in an undisclosed capacity. It will also include the question of whether the board was adequately informed of the conditions in Emma's 2019 agreement. And if they vote for the investigation, then Nathan loses operational autonomy until the investigation concludes," James said, "effective immediately." Patricia stood up. She walked to the window. She looked out at the garden that her late husband Robert had planted 20 years ago, and she thought about what he would have said about this moment, and she thought that he would have said something she would not have wanted to hear. She had always been the harder of the two of them. He had always been the one who understood when something was over. "James," she said, "is there anything that can stop the investigation?" "Honestly," James said. "Not today, not after what Emma presented. The only question is how broad the investigation gets." Patricia said nothing. "There's one more thing," James said. "Tell me." "Olivia Bennett is in the building," he said. "She came in this morning. I don't know who called her, but she's in Nathan's office right now, and she's been there since 9 a.m. And whatever conversation is happening in that room, it needs to stop before someone on the board asks to speak with her directly." Patricia moved very fast for a woman of 71. She was in her car in 4 minutes. She was at the Caldwell Corporation building in 20. She went directly to Nathan's office, bypassing reception, with the authority of someone who had never in her life asked permission to go anywhere in this building. She opened the door. Olivia Bennett was seated in the chair across from Nathan's desk, the chair where Nathan usually sat clients. She was on her phone. She looked up when Patricia entered. Patricia closed the door behind her. "Put the phone away," she said. Olivia lowered it slowly. Patricia looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her, not the social assessment she had performed when Nathan first introduced them, the quick calculation of background and appearance and potential utility that Patricia applied to everyone who entered her family's orbit. This was something different. This was the look of a woman who was trying to understand exactly what she was dealing with. "How long?" Patricia said. "Have you actually been working with my son?" Olivia met her gaze. "That's a complicated question," she said. "Uncomplicated," Patricia said. Olivia was quiet for a moment, and in that moment, Patricia saw something in her expression that she had not noticed before. Not guilt, not fear, something more calculated than either of those things. "I met Nathan at the Meridian Capital Conference in 2021, Olivia said. "I was there representing a consulting firm that specialized in organizational restructuring for mid-size real estate companies." Patricia said nothing. "We had dinner that night," Olivia continued. "We talked about the company, about where he wanted to take it, about the constraints he felt he was operating under." She paused. "About Emma." "What about Emma?" Patricia said. "He told me she had too much informal influence over the company's direction," Olivia said. "He said he needed to find a way to restructure things so that the company's decision-making was more clearly centralized under his authority." Patricia stared at her. "He said that in 2021, she said. "Yes. That's 4 years ago." "Yes." Patricia sat down in Nathan's chair. She sat in her son's chair in her son's office, and she looked at the woman her son had spent 4 years planning a future with, and she felt something she almost never felt. She felt afraid, not for herself, for Nathan. Because what Olivia had just described, a 4-year strategic relationship built around removing Emma's influence from the company, was not a love affair that had gotten complicated. It was something with a blueprint, something with a beginning and a plan and a destination that had very little to do with love and a great deal to do with control. And the question that was now assembling itself in Patricia Caldwell's mind, cold and unavoidable, was this: in that blueprint, what exactly was Nathan? Was he the architect, or was he the building? She looked at Olivia. Olivia looked back at her with an expression that was perfectly composed. Too composed. The way a person is composed when they have already run the scenario in their head and they know how it ends. "You should leave the building," Patricia said. Her voice was very quiet. "Nathan asked me to—" "My son is in a board meeting that is going to determine whether he keeps his company," Patricia said. "And you being in this building right now is not helping him. It is helping you, and I do not think those two things are the same." Olivia stood up. She gathered her bag. She looked at Patricia one more time, that same composed, calculated look, and then she walked out of the office without another word. Patricia sat alone in her son's chair for a long time, and for the first time in the entire history of this situation, she thought about calling Emma. Not to negotiate, not to manage the damage, but because Patricia Caldwell, who had spent 71 years being the smartest person in every room she walked into, was sitting in her son's office thinking about a 4-year plan she had not seen coming, and the only other person who had seen it, the only other person who had been paying the right kind of attention, was Emma Whitmore. Back in the boardroom, the recess had ended. The board had reconvened, and Robert Haynes, who had spent the 15-minute break on the phone with 2 people, Emma did not know, and one person she did, called the meeting back to order with the air of someone who has made a decision and is ready to announce it. "The board has discussed the information presented this morning," he said, "and we have agreed, pending one final matter, to vote on opening a formal independent investigation into the advisory arrangement and the financial disclosures related to the 2019 restructuring." Nathan looked at Gerald. Gerald was writing on his legal pad. "Before the vote," Robert said, "I want to give Nathan the opportunity to address one specific question." He looked at Nathan directly. "Nathan, were you aware at any point between 2021 and today that Olivia Bennett had a structured strategic interest in the outcome of your marriage and its impact on the company?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Everyone felt the ripple. Nathan looked at Robert. He looked at Sandra. He looked around the table at the faces of people he had worked with for years, people who had trusted him, people who had followed his leadership because they believed he was the person he had presented himself to be. He looked finally at Emma. Emma was watching him, not with triumph, not with anger, with something quieter and sadder than either of those things, with the look of a woman who had loved a man for a long time and was watching him arrive finally at a truth she had carried alone for months. "No," Nathan said. He said it quietly. "I was not fully aware," he said, "of the scope of her interest." Sandra wrote something down. Robert nodded. "Thank you," he said. The vote was called. It passed 5-2. The independent investigation would begin the following Monday. Nathan sat at the head of his table in the company his family had built, and he was still the CEO, and his name was still on the building, and the vote had only been 5-2, and Gerald was already talking about how they would manage the process. But something had happened in that room that morning that no vote could reverse. The story had changed. For 12 years, the story of Caldwell Corporation had been the story of Nathan Caldwell, his vision, his ambition, his leadership. In the space of one morning, with a leather folder and a quiet voice and documents that spoke for themselves, Emma Whitmore had rewritten the first chapter. And not a single person in that room would ever read the original version the same way again. The vote was 5-2, and Gerald Foss spent the entire elevator ride down from the 14th floor telling Nathan why that was actually not as bad as it sounded. Nathan did not hear a word of it. He stood in the elevator with his hands in his pockets and his eyes fixed on the number panel, and he thought about one thing only: not the investigation, not the board, not Gerald's voice moving beside him like background noise in a restaurant. He thought about the look on Emma's face when he had said he was not fully aware of the scope of Olivia's interest. She had not looked satisfied. She had not looked vindicated. She had looked at him the way you look at someone you once knew very well when you realize they have finally arrived somewhere you have been waiting for them for a long time. Not triumph. Something older and quieter than triumph. The look of someone who has been carrying a truth alone and has just watched someone else pick it up for the first time. That look stayed with him longer than anything else from that morning. The elevator opened. Gerald kept talking. Nathan walked through the lobby and out the front doors and stood on the sidewalk in the July heat and took a long breath of Dallas air and thought, what did I actually know about Olivia Bennett? He started going through it. I thought about Meridian Capital in 2021. He thought about the dinner. He thought about the things he had said that night, the things he had told her about Emma, about the company, about feeling constrained, about wanting to restructure things so the decision-making was cleaner and more centralized. He had said those things. He remembered saying them. He had felt at the time that he was being honest about the frustrations of leadership, the way you might be honest with a therapist or a trusted colleague. He had not thought about who was listening and what they were doing with what they heard. He had not thought about it because he had not wanted to think about it, because thinking about it would have required him to ask a question he did not want to ask. Now he was asking it. Standing on a Dallas sidewalk in July with Gerald still talking somewhere to his left, Nathan Caldwell asked himself for the first time whether Olivia Bennett had ever actually loved him, or whether he had been the most useful door she had ever found unlocked. He did not have an answer. He was not sure he wanted one. Gerald put a hand on his arm. "Nathan, are you hearing me?" "No," Nathan said honestly. Gerald stopped, looked at him. "Okay," he said after a moment. "Take the afternoon, but I need you in my office tomorrow morning at 8. We need to build a response strategy before the investigation team is named." "Fine," Nathan said. "And Nathan," Gerald's voice shifted slightly, became less the voice of an attorney and more the voice of a man who had known Nathan for 15 years and occasionally said things that were not billable. "Call your mother. She's been calling me since 9:30, and I've been letting it go to voicemail." Nathan nodded. Gerald left. Nathan stood alone on the sidewalk. He pulled out his phone. He looked at his call log. His mother had called 4 times. Olivia had called twice. Michael Reynolds's office had called once, which meant Emma had something she needed communicated formally. He called his mother. She picked up before the first ring finished. "Where are you?" "Outside the building," he said. "Come here," she said. "Now, not tomorrow, now." I knew that tone. He had known it since childhood, the tone that said whatever Patricia Caldwell needed to say to you could not wait and would not be softened by delay. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he said. He was there in 25. His mother met him in the front room of the family home, not the formal sitting room where she received guests, but the smaller room off the kitchen where she had always had her most important private conversations, the room where she had told Nathan his father was sick, the room where she had told him after Robert died that the company needed to keep moving, and sentiment was a luxury they could not afford right now. She was standing when he came in. She did not sit down. That alone told him the temperature of the conversation. "I spoke to Olivia this morning," she said, without preamble, without greeting. Nathan stopped. "At the office," she continued. "She was in your office when I arrived. I sent her away before the board could request to speak with her." "Why were you at the office?" he asked. "Because James called me," she said. "Because James understood what was happening before you did, apparently." She looked at him. "Nathan, how long have you actually known Olivia Bennett?" 4 years, he said. "You know that." "I knew you told me 4 years," she said. "I'm asking how long you've actually known her." He frowned. "Those are the same thing." "Are they?" Patricia said. She moved to the small table by the window and picked up a notepad. She had always been a woman who wrote things down during difficult phone calls, a habit she had developed during the years when Robert was building the company and information was money. "She told me you met at the Meridian Capital Conference in 2021. She told me you discussed Emma that night. She told me you talked about restructuring the company's decision-making to reduce Emma's informal influence." Nathan was very still. "She said those things to you," he said. "Yes." "Why would she—" He stopped, started again. "Why would she tell you that—" "That," Patricia said, setting the notepad down, "is the question I have been sitting with for the past 3 hours." She looked at her son with an expression he had not seen on her face before, not disappointment, which he had seen plenty of, and not anger, which he had also seen, but something that looked almost like uncertainty, which on Patricia Caldwell was so rare it was almost frightening. "Nathan, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Not the version you've told Gerald, not the version you've told yourself, the truth." "All right," he said. "Did you love her?" Patricia asked. "Olivia, did you actually love her, or was she—" She stopped, chose her next words carefully. "Was she a solution to a problem you had decided Emma represented?" The question hit him somewhere unguarded. He sat down. He sat in the small room where his mother had always told him the hardest truths, and he sat with that question, and the honest answer assembled itself slowly and uncomfortably in his chest. "Both," he said finally. Patricia looked at him. At first, he said, "I told myself it was real. I told myself what I felt was real. But somewhere along the way—" He stopped. "I stopped being able to tell the difference between what I actually felt and what was convenient to feel." Patricia sat down across from him. That was unusual enough, Patricia settling, that it shifted the quality of the room. She knew things, she said quietly. Olivia. She knew things about the company that I did not tell her and that you should not have told her. Details about the 2019 crisis. Details about Emma's role. Details about the board's internal dynamics. She paused. Either you told her more than you remember telling her, or she had another source. Nathan looked at his mother. Another source, he repeated. James Whitfield, Patricia said. He's been legal counsel for this company for 9 years. He was present in the March meeting. He is one of 3 people who had access to the specific financial records that would have given Olivia a complete picture of Emma's position within the company's structure. The room was very quiet. Are you saying, James? Nathan began. I'm saying I don't know, Patricia said, and not knowing is not something I am comfortable with. She looked at her son. But here is what I do know. The woman Emma has always been careful, patient, thorough. She did not walk into that boardroom today by accident. She walked in there because she had spent months building something airtight. And whatever she built it specifically because she knew what was coming. Not suspected. Knew. Nathan thought about that. He thought about Emma at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning in February 2019, reading his documents while he slept. He thought about the way she had always noticed things he was certain he had concealed. He thought about the look she had given him at the barbecue, not surprised, not devastated, just ready. She had always been 3 steps ahead. He had just been too proud to see it. What do we do? He said. Patricia was quiet for a moment, and then she said something Nathan had never in his entire life heard her say. I think, she said carefully, that we stop fighting her, and I think we start with honesty. Nathan stared at his mother. I know, Patricia said, reading his expression. I know what I'm saying, but Nathan, she saved this company. She saved it with her family's money, with her own credit, with 47 days of work that nobody acknowledged or compensated or even properly recorded. And then she watched you spend 3 years dismantling her role in everything she helped build. Patricia's voice did not waver, but something in it became heavier. And I helped you do that. I encouraged it, because I thought it was cleaner, simpler. I thought Emma would accept it and move forward and everyone would be fine. And instead she built a legal case, Nathan said. Instead, Patricia said, she protected herself, the way any reasonable person would when the people they trusted most decided they were inconvenient. She looked at her son. I underestimated her. That is my failure. But the rest of it, Nathan, the rest of it is yours. That was Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, 3 things happened in quick succession that changed the shape of everything. The first was that James Whitfield submitted his resignation from Caldwell Corporation's legal counsel position at 8:45 a.m., citing personal reasons. He did not elaborate. He did not answer Nathan's call. He did not respond to Gerald Foss's voicemail. His office was cleaned out by noon. The second thing was that a financial journalist named Carol Pratt, who covered Texas real estate for a well-regarded business publication and who had been following Caldwell Corporation for 3 years, published a piece that morning. It did not name Emma directly. It did not name Olivia. It referred only to a major Texas real estate firm navigating a leadership review following the disclosure of an undeclared advisory arrangement. But it was specific enough that anyone familiar with the Dallas business community understood immediately who was being discussed. The piece was shared 47 times before 9 a.m. By 11, it had been shared over 200. Sandra Cho forwarded it to the full board with a single line, "This is why we needed to move quickly." The third thing was a phone call that Emma did not expect. She was at Michael's office when her cell phone rang with a number she recognized, the landline at the Caldwell family home. Patricia's landline, the one Patricia used only when she was making a call she wanted to be certain could not be traced to her personal mobile. Emma looked at the number for a moment. She answered. "Patricia," she said. "Emma." The older woman's voice was different from any version of it Emma had heard in 12 years. Not the social voice warm and calibrated, not the managing voice smooth and strategic. Something underneath all of those voices, something direct. "I'd like to meet with you, without attorneys, without Nathan, just the 2 of us." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Because I owe you something I should have given you a long time ago," Patricia said. "And I would prefer to give it to you in person rather than through a document." Emma looked at Michael, who was watching her from across the desk, with his careful, attentive expression. She mouthed Patricia. His eyebrows went up slightly. She turned back to the phone. "Saturday morning," Emma said. 11 o'clock. There's a coffee shop on McKinney Avenue called the Blue Cup. I'll be at the corner table." "I know it," Patricia said. "I'll be there." She hung up. Michael looked at Emma. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know," Emma said, "but I want to." She set her phone on the desk. She knows something about Olivia, something she's not ready to put in writing yet. "What makes you think that—" "Because Patricia Caldwell doesn't ask for meetings without attorneys unless she has something to say that she does not want documented," Emma said. "And the only thing she knows right now that could possibly require that level of discretion is whatever Olivia told her in Nathan's office yesterday morning." Michael considered that. "Be careful," he said. "I'm always careful," she said. "You know that." Saturday arrived cool for July, which in Dallas was its own small miracle. Emma was at the Blue Cup at 10:50 at the corner table with a black coffee and her phone face down on the table. She was not nervous. She was curious, a different thing entirely. Patricia Caldwell arrived at 11 exactly. She was dressed simply by her standards. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which Emma noticed she still wore even after 7 years of widowhood. She sat down across from Emma and ordered tea from the server, and then looked at Emma with an expression that was stripped of its usual careful management. She just looked at her. "You look well," Patricia said. "Thank you," Emma said. Patricia wrapped both hands around her tea. "I'm going to say something to you, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." "All right," Emma said. "I knew," Patricia said, "that Nathan's marriage was in trouble long before last Saturday. I knew because Nathan told me. He came to me in 2022 and told me he had met someone and he wanted to begin transitioning out of the marriage, and he wanted to do it in a way that protected the company and protected the family name." She paused. "I advised him. I told him to move carefully. I told him to be strategic about Emma's role in the company before making any personal announcements." She looked at Emma steadily. "I helped him plan the process of removing you from his life." Emma did not look away. She had suspected this, had known it really in the way you know things you cannot yet prove. But hearing it said plainly by the woman who had sat beside her at every family gathering for 12 years landed differently than she expected. "Okay," Emma said. "That's all," Patricia said. "You said you owe me something," Emma said. "I'm listening." Patricia set her tea down. "What I didn't know," she said, "and what I should have been paying attention to, is who Olivia Bennett actually is. What she actually came here for." She paused. "She told me something on Thursday that I haven't told Nathan yet. I haven't told anyone. I'm telling you because you are the only person in this situation who I believe will do something useful with it." Emma put both hands flat on the table. "Tell me," she said. "Olivia Bennett's consulting firm," Patricia said. "OB Consulting Services. It's not a small independent practice. It's a subsidiary. It's connected through 2 holding companies to a real estate development group called Stratton Capital." Emma frowned slightly. "I know that name." "You should," Patricia said, "because Stratton Capital made an offer to acquire Caldwell Corporation in 2018 that Nathan rejected. He rejected it publicly and not kindly. He told their CEO, a man named Frederick Stratton, that he would sooner dissolve the company than sell it to someone who didn't understand what it represented." Emma was very still. "Stratton Capital," she said slowly, "sent Olivia Bennett." "I believe so," Patricia said. "I cannot prove it yet. I do not have documents, but I have 40 years of experience watching how acquisition attempts work, and I know what it looks like when someone gets close to a company through a personal relationship rather than a business negotiation." She looked at Emma. "Nathan didn't lose his judgment because he fell in love. He fell in love because someone made sure he would. Someone who needed him distracted, needed Emma removed from her informal oversight role, and needed the company's leadership weakened enough that when the right offer came at the right moment, there would be nothing solid left to refuse it." Emma sat back in her chair. The coffee shop continued around them, people talking, cups being set down, the quiet, ordinary life of a Saturday morning, and Emma sat in the middle of it and let the full shape of what Patricia had just said assemble itself in her mind. Olivia had not been a woman who fell for a married man. Olivia had been a position, a function, a deliberately placed piece in someone else's larger strategy. And Nathan, arrogant, distracted, hungry for validation, convinced that the woman he had married was a limitation rather than a foundation, had walked straight into it. "Does Nathan know any of this?" Emma asked. "Not yet," Patricia said. "Why are you telling me first?" Patricia looked at her for a long moment. "Because," she said, and the word came out with a weight that suggested it had been sitting in her chest for a long time. "You are the only person who will know what to do with it that doesn't involve burning everything to the ground. Nathan will rage, Gerald will strategize, the board will panic." She paused. "You will think." Emma looked at the older woman across the table. 12 years. 12 years of carefully maintained distance of warmth that never quite became trust of the particular relationship that exists between a woman and her mother-in-law when both of them are strong and both of them know it, and neither of them has ever quite had room to acknowledge it. "Patricia," Emma said quietly, "I'm not going to save this family twice." "I'm not asking you to," Patricia said. "I'm asking you to make sure the right people know the right things before someone makes a decision that cannot be undone." Emma looked at her coffee. She thought about the employees of Caldwell Corporation, the 437 people who worked in that building, and the subsidiary offices, the people who had nothing to do with Nathan's choices, or Olivia's strategy, or Patricia's calculations, the people who simply came to work and did their jobs and trusted that the structure above them was solid. She thought about Sandra Cho, who had stood up when Emma walked into the boardroom. She thought about Robert Haynes, who had asked the right question at the right moment. She thought about Michael Reynolds, who had told her months ago that windows don't stay open forever. "I need to make a call," Emma said. She picked up her phone. She called Michael. He answered on the second ring. "I need you to pull everything you can find on a company called Stratton Capital," she said. "Their corporate structure, their subsidiaries, their acquisition history. Anything connected to a man named Frederick Stratton." A pause. "How fast?" Michael asked. "Monday morning," she said. "Emma." His voice had changed slightly, the tone of a man recalibrating the size of what he's dealing with. "What did Patricia tell you?" "Enough," Emma said. "I'll explain everything Sunday afternoon. Right now, I need you to start pulling records." "All right," he said. "I'm on it." She hung up. She looked at Patricia. "I need you to write down everything Olivia told you," Emma said. "Not for the investigation, not for the board, for me. I need to understand the full timeline when they made contact, what she was told, what access she was given. Can you do that?" "Yes," Patricia said. "And Patricia," Emma leaned forward slightly, "I need you to think very carefully about whether there is anything else, any other conversation, any other arrangement, anything you were involved in that created the conditions for this that I do not yet know about." Patricia met her eyes. The older woman held the look for a long moment, and in that moment something moved across her face. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. The expression of someone standing at the edge of a full accounting and deciding whether to step forward. "There may be one more thing," Patricia said. "Tell me," Emma said. "The March meeting," Patricia said. "The one in the log, the one where Olivia was listed as an advisor." She paused. "That meeting was my idea." The coffee shop went very quiet, at least in Emma's perception of it. "I arranged the meeting," Patricia said. "I invited Olivia. I told James to list her as an advisor because I wanted it documented that she had a formal role because I was already thinking about the transition, and I wanted there to be a paper trail that supported her eventual public position within the company." She looked at Emma without flinching. "I did not anticipate that the paper trail would become evidence against us." Emma sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "Patricia, when the independent investigation begins Monday, they are going to find that meeting log. They are going to trace back who arranged it. They are going to find your name on it." "I know," Patricia said. "And you're telling me this now?" "Yes." "Why?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Emma had never expected to hear from this woman in this voice in any context. "Because I am tired," Patricia said. "I am 71 years old, and I am tired of managing outcomes, and I am tired of protecting arrangements that should never have been made in the first place." She looked at Emma, really looked at her the way she perhaps should have looked at her years ago. "And because you walked into that boardroom Wednesday morning and you told the truth. You told the full truth about all of it when you had every reason to weaponize it instead. And I watched my son sit there while you did it, and I thought—" She stopped. Her voice had developed a slight unevenness, the kind that happens in a person who rarely allows it. "I thought Nathan did not deserve her, and I helped him believe he did." Emma said nothing. She did not fill the silence. She let it exist between them, which was perhaps the most generous thing she had done for Patricia Caldwell in 12 years. Finally, Patricia straightened. She picked up her tea. She took one careful, composed sip. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Write everything down," Emma said. "All of it. The March meeting. The conversations with Nathan about the transition. Anything you know or suspect about Olivia's connection to Stratton Capital. Give it to me by Sunday evening." And then, Emma said, "I'm going to make sure that 437 people still have jobs on Tuesday morning." Patricia nodded. And for the first time in 12 years, the two women at the corner table of the Blue Cup on McKinney Avenue looked at each other, not as adversaries, not as extensions of Nathan's life, not as forces arranged on opposite sides of a complicated man. They looked at each other as themselves. It lasted only a moment, but it was real. Sunday evening, Emma sat at her desk with Michael Reynolds on the phone, two laptops open and a legal pad covered in her handwriting. Patricia's written account had arrived by private courier at 6 p.m., 12 pages, handwritten in Patricia's precise, old-fashioned script, covering everything from the first conversation about the transition in 2022 to the March meeting to a phone call Patricia had received from Olivia in April that she had not until now told anyone about. The April phone call was the piece that completed the picture. In that call, Olivia had asked Patricia casually, as if it were a routine question, whether Emma had ever mentioned the specific terms of the 2019 agreement to anyone outside of her attorney. Patricia had said she didn't know. Olivia had said that was fine, it was just something she was curious about, and changed the subject. Patricia had not thought much about it at the time, but now, reading her own account of it on paper, she had circled that paragraph 3 times and written in the margin. She was trying to find out if Emma had leverage. She already knew about the agreement. She needed to know if Emma knew how to use it. Emma read that margin note twice. "Michael," she said. "I see it," he said. He had a copy of the same pages. She wasn't just managing Emma out of the picture. She was trying to assess the risk Emma represented. If Emma didn't know the full scope of the clause, the plan moves forward smoothly. If Emma did know, then Emma was a threat, Emma said. And she needed to be neutralized before the plan reached its next stage, Michael said. Which means whatever Stratton Capital's next move was, it was coming, and it was probably coming soon. Emma set the pages down. She looked at the wall. "What's the next stage?" she said. It was not quite a question, more like thinking out loud. "An acquisition offer," Michael said. "After the investigation weakens Nathan's position, after the board loses confidence in his leadership, after the company's stock takes the hit that always follows this kind of disclosure, the company becomes vulnerable. Stratton Capital makes an offer. Nathan, weakened and isolated, is in no position to refuse. And Olivia," Emma said, "is already inside, already embedded, already positioned as the new leadership structure." "Yes," Michael said. Emma picked up her pen. She wrote one line on the legal pad. Then she looked at it for a long moment. She had the power to let this happen. She could step back, let the investigation run its course, let the board make its decisions, let the company become whatever it was going to become without her involvement. She had her settlement. She had her life. She had the quiet, rebuilt version of herself that she had been slowly constructing over the past several months in the spaces between all of this. She did not have to do anything else. But 437 people. She looked at the line she had written. It said, "Tell Sandra everything, tomorrow morning, before anyone else moves." She underlined it. Then she called Sandra Cho. Sandra answered on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. "Sandra," Emma said, "I need an hour of your time tomorrow morning, before the investigation team is named, before anyone from Stratton Capital makes any kind of contact with anyone on the board." A pause. "You know about Stratton," Sandra said. Emma stopped. "You already knew," Emma said. "I've been trying to prove it since Thursday," Sandra said. "I recognized the pattern when I saw the OB consulting payments. I've seen this kind of thing before, using a personal relationship as an entry point for a hostile acquisition. I just didn't have the full corporate trail yet." "I have Patricia Caldwell's written account," Emma said. and Michael Reynolds has the Stratton subsidiary records as of tonight. Emma. Sandra's voice was very focused, very fast. How complete is the picture you have right now? Complete enough, Emma said. Then I need you here at 7 a.m., Sandra said. Not 8, 7, before Gerald Foss arrives, before Nathan's PR team starts their morning calls, before anyone gets to shape the story. I'll be there at 6:45, Emma said. Good, Sandra said. Because if what you're telling me is accurate, we don't have until Monday. We have until whoever is watching this situation decides that the investigation itself is enough disruption to trigger their next move. I know, Emma said. Do you trust me? Sandra asked. Emma thought about that question. She thought about the woman who had stood up when she walked into the boardroom. She thought about the 5-2 vote. She thought about 4 words in an email. We need to talk, now. Yes, Emma said. I trust you. Then tomorrow, Sandra said. 6:45. Emma hung up. She sat at her desk in the quiet house and looked at the legal pad and thought about how far this had traveled from a white envelope on a barbecue table. She had walked away from that table to end a marriage. She had ended up in the middle of something much larger. And the woman who had spent 12 years standing behind a powerful man was now the only person who stood between that man's company and the people who had spent 4 years planning to take it. She had not asked for this, but she was here, and she was not going to walk away from 437 people just because the man at the center of everything had not been worth staying for. She turned off the desk lamp. She went to bed, and for the second time since the barbecue she slept without difficulty, because she knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly why. Emma arrived at the Caldwell Corporation building at 6:43 in the morning. The lobby was empty, except for the security guard, a man named Frank, who had worked the early shift for 6 years, and who had always greeted Emma by name when she came in with Nathan for Saturday morning sessions during the busy seasons. He looked up when she came through the glass doors, and something moved across his face. Recognition, and something underneath it that was not quite surprise but close to it. Mrs. Caldwell, he said. Good morning, Frank, she said, and her voice was warm and unhurried, the same voice she had always used with him. Sandra Cho is expecting me. Yes, ma'am, he said. She called down. Go right up. Emma rode the elevator to the 14th floor alone. She stood in the elevator and looked at her own reflection in the polished doors, and thought about the last time she had been in this building Wednesday, the boardroom, the folder, the 5-2 vote. 3 days ago. It felt like 3 months. The elevator opened. Sandra was already in the conference room adjacent to her office. Not the main boardroom, but the smaller one, used for working sessions with 2 laptops open, and a coffee service on the side table, and a whiteboard covered in handwriting that told Emma Sandra had been here for a while before 6:43. You've been here since 5, Emma said. 5:30, Sandra said, not looking up from the laptop. Close enough. Sit down. Tell me everything in order. Emma sat. She placed Patricia's 12 pages on the table. She placed Michael's Stratton Capital subsidiary records beside them. She placed her own legal pad with the timeline she had reconstructed Sunday night on top of both. Then she talked. She talked for 40 minutes without significant interruption. Sandra listened the way experienced people listen, not passively, not just waiting for her turn to speak, but actively leaning forward at certain points, writing things on her own notepad, asking sharp single questions that cut straight to the part she needed clarified, and then going silent again so Emma could continue. When Emma finished, Sandra sat back. She looked at the documents on the table. She looked at the whiteboard. She said Frederick Stratton made an offer in 2018 that Nathan rejected. Yes, Emma said, and Nathan rejected it in a way that was personal, Sandra said. Not just a business refusal, personal. That's what Patricia said. Nathan told him he would sooner dissolve the company. Sandra nodded slowly. I was at that meeting, she said. Emma looked at her. I was on the board in 2018, Sandra said. I was there when Nathan made that statement, and I remember thinking at the time, that's not how you talk to someone in this industry. You never close a door that completely. You never make it personal. She paused. Frederick Stratton shook Nathan's hand when he left very calmly and said he understood, and that he hoped Nathan would reconsider when circumstances changed. When circumstances changed, Emma repeated. Yes, Sandra said. At the time, it sounded like a standard exit line. Now it sounds like a schedule. The room was very quiet. How long do we have? Emma asked. If they've been watching the investigation develop since Wednesday, Sandra said, and if their acquisition play is contingent on board confidence being sufficiently weakened, I would estimate they move within the next 2 to 3 weeks, possibly sooner if they have someone inside the board providing real-time information. Emma looked at her. Someone inside the board, she said carefully. Sandra met her eyes. The two who voted against the investigation, Sandra said. I don't know. I don't want to believe it. But I'd be naive not to consider it. Emma thought about that. What do you need from me? She asked. The Stratton subsidiary documents, Sandra said, Patricia's account, and your signature on a formal request to expand the investigation scope to include external acquisition activity. She paused. With your conditional authority clause still active, your signature carries legal weight within the company's oversight structure. A board member's request can be delayed, debated, voted on. Your request under the terms of that clause triggers immediate regulatory notification. Emma understood immediately. If I file the expanded scope request, she said, Stratton Capital gets notified that the company is under active financial oversight review. Any acquisition attempt they make during an active oversight review becomes subject to regulatory scrutiny. It doesn't stop them, Sandra said, but it slows them. It removes the element of timing they've been counting on. And it gives us the window we need to stabilize the board, address the leadership question, and make sure that whatever happens next happens on this company's terms, not theirs. Emma picked up her pen. She looked at the document Sandra placed in front of her. She thought about Nathan. She thought about the 437 employees. She thought about Sandra standing up when she walked into the boardroom. She thought about Patricia's 12 handwritten pages arriving by courier on a Sunday evening. She signed. Sandra picked up the document. She looked at it for one moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the company's regulatory compliance officer, a woman named Helen Torres, who answered on the first ring because Sandra had warned her the night before that a call was coming. File it, Sandra said. Right now, this morning. Already have the system open, Helen said. Send it through. Sandra sent it. It was 7:22 in the morning. By 8 o'clock, Frederick Stratton's legal team had received the regulatory notification. Emma did not know exactly what happened in Frederick Stratton's offices that morning. She would piece it together later from various sources in the way you piece together events that happened in rooms you were not in. But the broad shape of it was this: Stratton Capital had been preparing to deliver a formal acquisition offer to Caldwell Corporation's board within the next 10 days. The offer had been structured carefully, timed to land at the precise moment when the board was most divided and Nathan's authority was most compromised. The regulatory notification filed at 7:22 in the morning by Sandra Cho's compliance officer created a legal environment that made that timing impossible. A hostile acquisition attempt against a company under active financial oversight review would trigger a level of regulatory examination that Stratton Capital's legal team was not prepared to navigate in the current timeline. They pulled back, not permanently, but enough. And enough was what Emma had asked for. Nathan found out about the filing at 8:45 when Gerald Foss called him with a voice that was 2 degrees higher than his normal register, which for Gerald Foss indicated serious agitation. Sandra Cho and Emma filed an expanded investigation scope this morning, Gerald said. It triggered a regulatory notification. Stratton Capital received it at 8 a.m. Nathan was in his car. He pulled over. Say that again, he said. Gerald said it again. Nathan sat in his parked car and listened to Gerald explain the legal implications and what it meant for the acquisition timeline and what Stratton Capital's likely next move would be. And the entire time Gerald was talking, Nathan was thinking about one thing. Emma had done it again. She had seen something he had not seen, built something he had not built, moved in a direction he had not anticipated, and protected something he had failed to protect. She had done it in 2019 with $6.2 million and 47 days at a kitchen table. She had done it now with a signature and a regulatory filing at 7:22 in the morning while he was still asleep. He ended the call with Gerald. He sat in the parked car. He thought about a question he had been avoiding since Wednesday, a question he had walked around and looked at from various angles and then set aside because none of the angles made him look good. What had he actually been building these past 4 years that was worth what he had lost to build it? He did not have an answer that satisfied him. He started the car. He drove to Michael Reynolds' office. He had not called ahead. He did not know if Michael would see him. He went anyway because there was no one else he could go to who would be honest with him, and he had spent enough time surrounding himself with people who told him what he wanted to hear. Michael's assistant looked up when Nathan walked in. "Mr. Caldwell," she said carefully, "do you have an appointment?" "No," Nathan said. "I know he's here. I'd like 5 minutes. I'm not here about the case. I'm here because I need to talk to someone who will tell me the truth." The assistant looked at him for a moment. She picked up the phone. She spoke quietly into it. She waited. She set it down. "He'll see you," she said. 5 minutes. Michael was behind his desk when Nathan came in. He did not stand. He did not offer his hand. He looked at Nathan with the steady, unimpressed expression he brought to every difficult room. "Sit down," he said. Nathan sat. "I'm not here to negotiate," Nathan said. "I know," Michael said. "What do you want?" Nathan looked at the man across the desk, the man who had helped his wife prepare for 3 months while Nathan had been conducting an affair and planning a transition and believing he was managing everything cleanly. "I want to understand," Nathan said, "what I missed." Michael looked at him. "You want me to tell you what you missed?" Michael said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because everyone else will either protect me or punish me," Nathan said. "You're the only one who doesn't have a reason to do either." Michael considered that for a moment. Then he said, "You missed the person in front of you. That's what you missed. You were so focused on the company, on the next deal, on being seen as the man who built something that you stopped seeing the person who was actually building it with you. And when that person became inconvenient to the story you were telling about yourself, you looked for a way to remove her instead of looking for a way to deserve her." He paused. "That's not a business failure. That's a human one, and those are harder to investigate and harder to fix." Nathan said nothing. "She didn't have to file this morning," Michael said. "You understand that. She had the legal authority to do far more damaging things than a regulatory expansion filing. She chose the narrowest possible intervention, the one that protected the company and the employees without maximizing your exposure. She did that on purpose." "I know," Nathan said. "Do you know why?" Nathan looked at his hands. "Because it's who she is," he said. "Yes," Michael said. "It is, and it always was. You just decided at some point that it was a quality you could take for granted." The 5 minutes had long passed. Neither man mentioned it. "What do I do now?" Nathan said. "That," Michael said, "is the first honest question you've asked in a very long time." He leaned back in his chair. "You cooperate with the investigation, fully. No managing, no positioning, no PR strategy. You give them everything they ask for. You acknowledge Patricia's role in the March meeting. You acknowledge the Olivia arrangement for what it was, even the parts that are uncomfortable. And then you accept whatever the board decides, and you lead the company, if they let you lead it, the way you should have been leading it from the beginning." "And Emma," Nathan said. Michael looked at him steadily. "Emma," he said, "is not a problem you solve. She is not a situation you manage. She is a person you harmed, and the only appropriate response to that is accountability without expectation of reward." He paused. "If you apologize, it needs to be because you mean it, not because you want something back." Nathan nodded. He stood up. "Thank you," he said. Michael nodded once. Nathan left. The investigation ran for 6 weeks. It was conducted by an independent firm out of Houston, 3 investigators, a forensic accountant, and a regulatory compliance specialist who had spent 20 years untangling exactly this kind of corporate mess. They were thorough and they were fast, which was unusual, but Sandra Cho had been specific in her requirements when she selected them, and they delivered. The findings when they came were not gentle. The report confirmed that Olivia Bennett had been engaged as an undisclosed advisor to Caldwell Corporation for a period of approximately 14 months. It confirmed that she had received $40,000 in compensation from the company's discretionary budget. It confirmed that Patricia Caldwell had arranged the March meeting and directed James Whitfield to document Olivia's attendance in a category that implied official standing she did not legitimately hold. It confirmed that the board had not been informed of any of these arrangements. It also confirmed separately and clearly what Emma had presented on Wednesday, the full scope of her 2019 contribution, the $6.2 million, the personal loan guarantee, the 47 days. The report noted in language that was measured but unmistakable that these contributions had never been formally acknowledged, compensated, or included in the company's official records of the crisis response. The board convened to act on the report on a Tuesday morning in September. Emma was not there. She did not need to be. She was at Michael's office on the phone with a woman named Dr. Cheryl Okafor, a family law attorney who ran a small nonprofit in Fort Worth that provided legal aid to women in controlling or financially abusive marriages. Dr. Okafor had called Emma 2 weeks earlier after reading a brief, carefully worded account of the Caldwell situation in a Texas legal journal that Michael had arranged to have published. "I've been doing this work for 18 years, Dr. Okafor told her, "and the number of women I see who are in your situation, who contributed everything to someone else's success, and then found themselves legally and financially exposed when that relationship ended, it's not a small number. It's not an isolated situation. It's a pattern." "I know," Emma said. "I'm building a program," Dr. Okafor said. "Financial literacy, legal resource navigation, strategic exit planning for women who are still inside situations like yours and can't see a way out. I have the curriculum. I have 2 attorneys willing to donate time. What I don't have is funding or a legal framework that would allow us to scale." Emma looked at Michael across the desk. I was watching her with the expression of a man who already knew where this conversation was going and approved of the destination. "Tell me what you need," Emma said. "A foundation," Dr. Okafor said. "Something with legal standing, with the ability to receive funding and distribute resources. Something with a name that means something to the women who need it." Emma thought about her mother, Catherine, about the woman who had taught her that commitment meant something, about the way that teaching had been both the source of her strength and the thing that had kept her in place long past the point when leaving would have been wisdom. She thought about the 47 days. "I'll establish it," Emma said. "I'll fund the first 2 years, and I want Dr. Okafor as the executive director." Michael wrote something on his notepad. Dr. Okafor was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. "Why?" she said. "You don't know me. You don't know my work beyond what I've just described." "I know enough," Emma said. "I know what the problem is. I know you've been working on it for 18 years. And I know that the kind of work you're describing requires someone who has been in rooms I've been in and came out still wanting to help, rather than wanting to burn things down." A pause. "I came out still wanting to help," Dr. Okafor said quietly. "I know," Emma said. "That's why I'm calling you back." The board's decisions came through Michael's office at 2 o'clock that Tuesday afternoon. Nathan would remain CEO, but under a newly structured oversight committee that included Sandra Cho as chair and 2 independent directors brought in from outside the company. All major financial decisions above a specified threshold would require committee approval for a period of 18 months. Patricia Caldwell would step back from all formal and informal advisory roles, with the company effective immediately. The board's statement on this was diplomatic, but its meaning was plain. James Whitfield was already gone. The $40,000 in advisory payments to OB Consulting Services would be clawed back through legal proceedings. Olivia Bennett's attorneys had already been notified, and the company's financial records would be amended formally and permanently to reflect Emma Whitmore's contributions during the 2019 crisis. A repayment schedule for the $6.2 million, with interest calculated from the date of transfer, would be established and filed with the board within 30 days. Michael read the decisions to Emma line by line. When he finished, the room was quiet. "Is it enough?" he asked. Emma thought about that. "It's correct," she said. "Whether it's enough is a different question." "What's the answer to that question?" She looked at the window. "Some things can be made right," she said, "and some things can only be made different. The company will be fine. The employees will be fine. The record will say what it should say." She paused. "Whether Nathan will be okay, that depends on Nathan, and that's not my responsibility anymore." Michael nodded. "No," he said, "it isn't." She was gathering her things to leave when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Nathan. She stood with the phone in her hand for a moment. She answered. "I heard from Gerald," Nathan said. His voice was different from any version of it she could place. Not the smooth negotiating voice, not the managed, composed voice he had used in the boardroom. Something underneath all of those versions. Something that sounded like the man he had been when he was 28 years old, and still uncertain and still real. "The board's decisions." "Yes," she said. "Emma," he stopped. I know there isn't a version of what I'm about to say that's adequate. I know that. But I need to say it anyway." A pause. "I'm sorry. For the barbecue. For the 3 years before the barbecue. For treating the person who saved my company, who saved me, like something I could upgrade when I got tired of the model. His voice had developed the slight unevenness she had heard in Patricia's voice at the coffee shop. I'm sorry for not seeing you when you were right in front of me, every day, for 12 years. Emma stood in Michael's office with her bag in her hand and her coat over her arm and her phone against her ear, and she listened to her husband of 12 years say the things she had waited for him to say for longer than she wanted to admit. She felt it land. She did not pretend she didn't. She was not made of stone, and she had never pretended to be. Nathan, she said. Yes. I believe you mean that. I do, he said. I know, she said. And I want you to hear me when I say I hope you carry it forward. Not to me. I'm not the place that apology needs to go anymore. But carry it forward, into how you lead, into how you treat the people around you, into whether you are ever again in a room where someone is doing the work and you are taking the credit. She paused. That's what I want from your apology. Not forgiveness. Forward motion. A long silence. Okay, Nathan said. And the word was so quiet, so stripped of everything performative, that it was more convincing than any speech could have been. Take care of yourself, Emma said. She hung up. Michael was looking at her. You all right? He asked, the same question he always asked first. Yes, she said. And she meant it the same way she had meant it the night of the barbecue, not as a performance, not as a brave face, but as an actual true thing. She was all right. She left the office. She walked out into the September afternoon, which had finally broken from the summer heat, the way Dallas afternoons eventually always did, and the air was cooler than she expected, and she stopped for a moment on the sidewalk just to feel it. The foundation was established 3 weeks later. Emma named it the Catherine Fund after her mother. The launch was quiet, a small event in Fort Worth with Dr. Okafor and 2 other attorneys and a handful of women who had agreed with great courage to tell their stories in abbreviated form to a small gathering of potential donors and legal professionals. No press, no cameras, no performance of triumph, just the work. Sandra Cho sent flowers. Patricia Caldwell sent a check, a significant one. It arrived with a handwritten note that said, "Only for what's owed." And then below that, in smaller letters, "She would have been proud of you." Emma read the note twice. She set it carefully in the drawer of her desk, where she kept the things that mattered. She did not frame it. She did not share it. She did not need anyone else to witness it. It was enough that it was true. 9 months after the barbecue, the divorce was finalized. There were no cameras outside the courthouse. There was no moment of drama. Nathan signed where he was supposed to sign, and Emma signed where she was supposed to sign, and Michael shook Emma's hand in the corridor afterward, and that was the end of 12 years. She drove home alone. She made herself a cup of coffee. She sat at the desk in the room that had once been the office where she quietly kept Nathan Caldwell's empire from falling apart, and she opened her laptop, and she began writing the formal proposal for the Catherine Fund's second year of operations, 3 new cities, 2 additional staff positions, a partnership with a university law school that Dr. Okafor had been cultivating for months. She wrote for 2 hours. It was the best 2 hours she had spent in as long as she could remember. 1 year after the barbecue, Emma Whitmore sat across from Dr. Okafor in a conference room in Fort Worth and looked at a report that said the Catherine Fund had served 214 women in its first year, had helped 63 of them navigate legal proceedings, had provided financial literacy training to 111, had connected 47 women with emergency housing resources, 214 women who had walked into the fund's offices carrying the particular weight of being invisible in their own lives, 214 women who had walked out with something they had not had when they came in. Not revenge, not victory, not even justice necessarily. Justice was complicated and slow and not always available, something more durable than all of those things. Information, options. The knowledge that what had happened to them had a name, had a structure, had a legal framework that could be navigated, had other women on the other side of it who were standing and building and moving forward. Emma looked at the number for a long time. 214. Dr. Okafor was watching her. "You're doing the calculation," she said. "I'm always doing the calculation," Emma said. "What does it say?" Emma looked up. "It says we need a bigger table," she said. Dr. Okafor smiled. "I already called the university," she said. "They have space." Emma nodded. She turned back to the report. She picked up her pen, and she got to work. That is the thing about women like Emma Whitmore, that the people who underestimate them never understand until it is too late. They are not waiting to be rescued. They are not waiting to be seen. They are not waiting for the person who overlooked them to finally understand what they lost. They are building, quietly, carefully, with their whole selves and their full intelligence and the particular kind of patience that comes from having spent years learning exactly what they are capable of when no one is watching. And when the moment comes when the envelope is placed on the table and the paper is signed and the car is started and the long road back to themselves begins, they do not look back. Not because they are not feeling anything, but because everything worth building is already ahead of them. Emma Whitmore had walked away from a broken table, and she had built a better one. And at that table, 214 women had found a seat. That was the story. That was all of it, and it was enough.